John Hook's Newsmaker starts now.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker. We have witnessed immigration roundups across the country in recent months. The Trump administration prioritizing people here illegally who have committed serious crimes. But caught up in some of these raids, people who have broken the law of entering the country illegally or maybe overstayed their visas, but not necessarily people with serious criminal histories. So the question is, and we're going to try to get some answers tonight, what are the rules surrounding these actions by ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement? Josh Colesrud is a criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor, about the rules of the road when it comes to these ICE raids. Josh, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let me go right through a couple of things, and this is from the Immigration USA website. And I was looking through ACLU and other immigrant activist websites. I was amazed at how much they preached compliance. I expected it to be much more resist, don't give them anything. Quite to the contrary.
And the reason why the organizations like the ACLU and others are advocating peacefulness, so to speak, is because if you give the government an opportunity to arrest you, they will. And if you don't have status in the country, that could lead to deportation or removal or even other charges like assault on officers. And you can't harass or touch government employees. But of course, you can have some type of civil disobedience.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's go through the rules of the road. Can ICE agents detain people without a warrant?
Well, the answer is yes. If they see that somebody in front of them is committing a border crime, like an immigration crime or a drug crime, and they have probable cause that this person is doing something illegal for those types of crimes in front of them, they can absolutely do so. Otherwise, they do need a warrant. And in order for ICE to come into a building, for instance, they need more than just a warrant. It has to be what's called a judicial warrant, signed by a judge, not an administrative warrant. So, what we've been counseling our clients in these situations is that if an ICE agent comes to their front door, they are, the people inside the house are permitted to ask the ICE agent, for a copy of the warrant first before opening the door. And they need to make sure that it's, again, a judicial warrant signed by a judge. But if the ICE agent does have a judicial warrant, they can properly arrest anybody that is on the warrant itself.
Josh, what if there's criminal activity suspected within that house? Can the ICE officers bust in?
That's a good question. So if there are exigent circumstances, meaning that if they don't burst into the door, there's going to be some sort of destruction of evidence, they certainly are permitted to do so in limited circumstances.
Just to clear this up, because people talk about this all the time, simply entering the country, that is a crime.
Well, it depends. Now, anybody entering the country has to do so at a port of entry. So if you're coming across by land, you have to come through. Like in Arizona, we have 5 ports of entry. You can come through, Nogales. You can come through Yuma. And there's various other ones.
Sure.
If you do not if you don't cross through the port of entry, that is illegal entry, despite whether or not you're an illegal alien or a U.S. citizen. You have to go through the port of entry. And same
okay,
thing
if you've entered the country illegally, that is a crime.
Yes, if you do not have status and you are present in the country, it is a status crime. It's the equivalent to trespassing. You don't have permission to be on somebody's property. That person gave you notice that you weren't supposed to be there. They can call the police for trespassing.
Got it. Okay.
That's what this is in a nutshell.
Okay. Can ICE agents wear face coverings or masks?
Absolutely. ICE agents are permitted to protect themselves or wear any covering on the face they want. Now, that doesn't mean that their actions are not reviewable. because once they make an arrest, their names go on what's called ROIs, reports on investigations, just a fancy word for a police report, and we'll know what their name and badge number is, and we'll be able to scrutinize, the lawyers will, whether their actions were lawful or not.
Do you think it's justified for them to cover their face because they're worried about recrimination, scrutiny from other people, and that threats have been, we've had this documented where people are being doxxed, their family threatened. This is a lot of the reason why these agents are wearing masks.
It's a public safety issue for the individual agencies, and they've determined, because of the level of acrimony that some sections of the public has for this particular law enforcement agency, that they have to protect their agents. And in their judgment, and I'll defer to them, that's the best thing that they can do.
And it's not a standard law enforcement practice to wear a covering over your face. But in this case, because of the heightened angst over all of this, it's okay.
Exactly. And, you see that it's strange that, politicians, are, throwing gasoline on the fire, so to speak, by demanding that ICE agents not wear face masks or coverings, because it's an intimidation tactic, and they do not want these ICE raids to happen.
Okay. Does ICE have to notify anyone when a detention is made?
Yes, they are required to, well, first of all, notify the U.S. Attorney's Office whether or not charges are being submitted. So once somebody is arrested, they have 48 hours in federal court to be able to see a judge. If they do not see a judge within 48 hours, they have to be released. So that not only does the U.S. Attorney's Office have to be notified, but also the Public Defender's Office, who would then be representing the person charged with the immigration-related crime or the drug-related crime.
What happens if can ICE detain somebody if the child is a citizen, but the parent is not?
Absolutely. There's no exception to whether or not ICE may or may not arrest somebody based on family status. And this isn't new. This is something that has happened under every president that I worked for. I worked under 3 different presidents, and this was the policy for ICE and Homeland Security the entire time.
Can I throw at you, this is from the National Immigrant Justice Center. This gets back to what I alluded to at the top of the program, that even in their directives to people, and they're very pro-immigrant, they say under the section, defend your rights. Stay calm, don't run, argue, resist, or fight the officer, even if you believe your rights are being violated. Don't lie about your status or provide false documents. If you are a U.S. citizen, have lawful immigration status, show your passport, legal permanent resident card, work permit, or other documentation of your status. If you're over age 18, they're advising you carry your papers with you at all times. Is that onerous?
It's good advice, because your statements and actions can always be used against you later on. And you don't want your, let's say, your obstructive actions to be presented to an immigration judge when you're asking the judge to allow you to have status in the country. What you want to be able to show is that you were polite, that you provided your identification, which is required by law. So the only thing that you ever have to provide to law enforcement is your identification. So, you can either do it the easy way or you can do it the hard way, but otherwise they're going to find out. And then lastly, never lie to law enforcement, especially ICE agents, because it's a federal crime. So even if you have status in the country, if it's shown that you lied to ICE agents, you can still get charged with a felony. So that is very good advice.
Okay, it says if you are undocumented, you have the right to remain silent. You do not have to discuss your immigration or citizenship status with police, immigration agents, or other officials. Anything you tell an officer can be used against you in immigration court. You mentioned that. If an officer knocks on your door, and again, this is from the National Immigrant Justice Center. If an officer knocks on your door, do not open the door. Teach your children not to open the door. Officers must have a warrant signed by a judge to enter your home. ICE warrants are not signed by, if they are not signed by judges, or there are ICE forms signed by ICE officers, they do not grant authority to enter a home without consent of the occupants. All true?
Everything you just said is true. And so when, regardless of whether or not you have status in the country, you still have the same constitutional rights of any U.S. citizen. And one of those rights is to be secure in your place, your house, for instance. So what they were just talking about is that don't open the door for law enforcement. And you know what? That's certainly advice. But what you want to do, and which is what they said, is make sure that they have a judicial warrant before you decide to do anything. And once you ask them for that, they have to provide it for you.
Yeah, they can slide it under the door. There are ways to do it that are non-intrusive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm very curious about a couple of things. I want to take a macro view here for a minute. Data shows basically where we are right now. Border crossings have plummeted. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE arrests have doubled, and the number of people detained is at an all-time high. What's interesting is the expulsions are mainly Central America, people from Central America, Mexico, Haiti, and South America. I found this interesting. 29% have criminal convictions, 25% pending criminal charges that are out there. 47%, though, listed as other immigration violators. What does that mean?
Well, it's a generic term that it could mean a variety of things. It could mean that they have a prior illegal entry into the country. It also could mean that they have a different immigration-related crime. It could be passport fraud. It could be some type of document fraud.
Social Security fraud, that they've got a dummy Social Security number?
Exactly.
Okay.
If they're an imposter taking over somebody else's identity, exactly.
Okay. And finally, 12% are listed as fast-tracked for deportation. Who would those people be?
Those listed as fast-tracked for deportation would be those who have no prior illegal entries into the United States. So, typically the U.S. Attorney's Office will not prosecute you unless you have at least one prior illegal entry into the United States.
Removals by criminality. This is coming, by the way, from the ICE website. Removals by criminality. The top 3 cities: Harlingen, Texas, El Paso, Texas, and Phoenix, Arizona. What do you think most of those crimes deal with?
Well, I think that a lot of them have to do with prior illegal entries into the United States.
Okay.
However, in the past 5 to 6 years, we've seen a significant increase in individuals coming across here illegally with drug-related offenses, whether it's possession or drug trafficking.
What about human smuggling?
Oh, absolutely.
That's part of it.
USC 1324.
When we see these scenes out of LA, when it gets really scrappy, that strikes me that that's mostly outside agitators. Am I misreading that, or that's not the people actually being detained generally?
Exactly. They're there for a political purpose. Those that are here without status, they don't want to be seen, and they don't want to cause a ruckus because that just brings unwanted attention onto themselves. They want to just get on with their lives and, hopefully be able to make some money to send home. The last thing they want is for people like regular U.S. citizens to be mad at illegal aliens because they're rioting or committing all these crimes or protesting. That just doesn't make sense, with common sense, that these people would actually be doing that. I have met through, defendants and my clients, many people in this situation, and none of them have empathy for the agitators that are doing this because it just brings unwanted attention to them.
Final thing, how much are you dealing with? Because you represent people who get caught up in this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so tell me about when ICE moves in, supposedly to arrest the worst of the worst. That's kind of what we were presented from President Trump. But they are sweeping up people who are here illegally, but are not committing crimes other than the crime of entering the country illegally. How are we kind of balancing these things? Because public opinion on the criminality part, it's very strong. Remove those people. We don't want them here. But on the part of people who are here illegally, but doing the right thing, so to speak, people have a completely different view of that.
Sure. So that would be a policy decision about how to enforce already existing laws. So, President Trump and his predecessors, they had policies about how they were going to enforce 8 U.S.C. 1325, which is illegal entry into the United States. Now, President Trump isn't the first one to invoke that statute aggressively. President Obama was termed, the deporter in chief. And President Trump has a very aggressive stance on this. And for him and his base, they feel like there's a zero-sum game. It's black and white. If you're here illegally, you need to be prosecuted and removed. Now, the policy is a completely different story, and that is whether or not it's the right thing to do. And, that's for elections. That's for the people voting for their politicians to decide.
Are you dealing with people, though, swept up in an ICE raid where they think they're going after criminals, but during the course of that, they find somebody here illegally or somebody who's overstayed a visa, and they're going to be subject to removal too, right?
I've heard horror stories where, there's an 800 number where you can call and turn in your neighbor. And that happened to one of my clients, and, her neighbor didn't like her, and she was driving to work, and ICE got behind her, and she pulled over, and they didn't even allow her to exit her vehicle. They walked up to the driver's side door, broke open the window, and dragged her out onto the street and arrested her because they said that she had a prior removal, and thus, she could be charged with a felony. So it is, very scary for anybody living in this country without status.
And Josh, isn't that the point of the administration? They're trying to make it inhospitable so that people self-deport, or it certainly repels people from wanting to come here illegally.
Yes, there is a deterrent effect.
Is that effective?
Absolutely it is. We have the lowest amount, when I say we, the United States has the lowest amount of border crossings, illegal border crossings, in the last 20 or 30 years. It has dried up to just a trickle. And that's because, the cartels are no longer advertising on the radio stations in Guatemala saying, give us your money and we'll get you into the United States, which is what they were doing prior to Trump being elected.
Incredibly interesting. We got to have you back. Josh Colesrud, criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor. He knows this issue from both sides. I learned a lot. Thank you very much, Josh. It was very, very interesting.
Of course. Thank you.
Good to see you. When we come back, Justin Lum joins me to talk about the final chapter of Doomsday Mom, Lori Vallow. We're back in a minute. Welcome back on Newsmaker. Doomsday Mom, Lori Vallow Daybell, sentenced to 2 more life terms in prison on top of 5 other life sentences out of Idaho. It's a safe bet she will never see freedom again. Investigative reporter Justin Lum has literally been on this case since the day it broke 5.5 years ago, and we wanted to kind of have a chance to talk to you about your reflections on what's happened.
Where do we start, John?
I don't know. The only thing I can think of is I wanted to ask you, the first day you got the call, it came into the newsroom that we had stuff brewing in the East Valley.
Yeah, so it was December 21st, 2019. One of our producers at the time, Melissa, told me that this would be a national story. You had 2 missing kids out of Rexburg, Idaho, but they had ties to the East Valley. Their mother, Lori Vallow, at the time, her estranged husband, Charles Vallow, had been shot and killed by her brother in Chandler in July of 2019. And at this point, we knew that her brother was dead, Alex Cox, and that the man she was now with, Chad Daybell, his wife, had died out of nowhere, and her body had been exhumed by authorities. So you had 2 dead spouses, 2 missing kids, and 2 persons of interest who we couldn't find at the time. They were not suspects at the time.
It's incredible. And when you look back on it, I mean, Lori Vallow, all of the doomsday beliefs that she apparently got from Chad Daybell, But it seems that if you just kind of step back for a minute, forget all the dark spirits and all the crazy ideas they had, it seemed like anybody who stood in the way of their new relationship, she ends up with Chad Daybell, was eliminated out of convenience. They cleared the decks of anybody who was an impediment to their new life they were starting.
Yeah, really the hook of this story on the surface is these light and dark spirits and what they believe. And if you are in opposition, you're an enemy, you're considered dark. But then there's this money motivation, because we now know Charles Vallow had a $1 million life insurance policy. He took Lori off as the beneficiary when she started making threats to him and saying these bizarre religious things, and changed it to his sister. Tammy Daybell, Chad's first wife, had a $400,000 life insurance policy. He profited off of that after her death, and then the Social Security benefits from the children on behalf of Charles Vallow's death, J.J. Vallow's father, and Tylee Ryan's father, who had also died back in 2018. So money was coming in, and that was a motive in this case.
Lori Vallow, just for people backing up, where did she go wrong? What happened? What happened to her?
From sources I've talked to, this goes back to maybe even before 2016, 2015, when the family, her and Charles Vallow and the kids, lived in Hawaii, and she was already a fan of Chad Daybell's books. Let's not forget that he was this doomsday fictional author.
Was he successful?
I would say he had a niche group of fans.
Could he live off this?
No, he did not make a lot of money off of this. So he was also a former gravedigger way back in the day, but he wrote about the end of times.
That's interesting.
And used these fictional stories and wrote about that. She became a fan, and he told her that she was basically a god, and they had been married in a past life. She bought into this, and then this plan sets in motion.
Do you know now who killed JJ and Tylee, her two children? Do you know who actually killed them?
Directly, I think, according to the trial evidence that we've seen, it is Chad Daybell and Alex Cox, Lori's brother, who died in December of 2018. They did it. Lori conspired, in being that she was their mother. You know, she's directly involved, and they lived with her at the time. That's why she was convicted of first-degree
We've got
murder.
about a minute. It turns out that Chad Daybell, he's on death row in Idaho, but he's up there spending time with Brian Kohberger. Kohberger's in the same prison. It's the, I think it's the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. And that's in Kuna?
And Chad's the one on death row.
Right.
Yeah, right? So, I mean, it's these two huge cases, and now Lori will head back there at some point within the next month. She's still at the Estrella jail here in Phoenix, but she'll be heading back to the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center to spend the rest of her life in prison.
You did a great job on this.
Thank you,
devoted a lot of your life to it.
A lot of hours, yeah. A lot of off time. I appreciate it.
It's great to see you. Justin Lum. When we come back, we say goodbye to a legendary Arizona figure in politics, Alfredo Gutierrez, next on Newsmaker. Before we go, I wanted to take a moment to honor a legendary Arizonan. This week, we lost Alfredo Gutierrez at the age of 79 to cancer. He packed a lot of life in those years, an Army veteran during Vietnam, an immigrant rights activist, Arizona lawmaker, and quite simply, a force of nature. Whether or not you agreed with his politics, you could not ignore Alfredo Gutierrez, a man with unshakable conviction. Born the son of a miner in Miami, Arizona, he rose to the upper echelons of power. First as a student activist for Chicano rights at ASU, kicked out for leading protests on campus. Inspired by Cesar Chavez, he co-founded Chicanos por la Causa in Phoenix. At 27, he was elected to the Arizona legislature, rising to leadership. He was considered a shrewd deal-maker. Eventually, he ran for governor in 2002, losing in the primary to Janet Napolitano. But his passion was giving voice to the voiceless. From leading a boycott of Phoenix Union High School, pushing for better educational opportunities for Latinos, to later leading the charge against the anti-immigrant law SB 1070. About what drove him, Gutierrez once said, "Hope motivates me every day."